We are joined on the phone now by attorney Susan Williams, and Susan has been following this case since the very beginning. Susan Williams, Low Country attorney. Susan, thanks so much for joining us today. Susan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. So we just heard from Alec Murdaugh. He took the stand this morning. I want to ask, were you surprised that he did that?
I was completely flabbergasted. I had if you would have told me this a couple of years ago or however long, I would have said, no way is he going to testify. It's very rare to see a defendant testify in a case, and a case in general, much less one this big, with so much to lose.
Susan, do we still have you?
Yes.
Okay, why do you think he did?
I think that he did because the same reason that he did what he's alleged of doing, if he actually did it, because he thinks that he can outsmart. He thinks he thinks that his personality, that his influence, his power is going to be more well regarded from the jury than what the actual facts and what the science and what the hard evidence is.
And I think one of the big bombshells from this morning is when Alec admitted on stand that he lied. He lied to SLED. He lied about the evening of June 7th. What were your thoughts on that admission?
We all knew that he was lying. I mean, there were lies that we've known about that's come out in the testimony so far, and I to know that he lied, but to hear him talking about what I found incredibly ironic is that he said that the reason for lying is his distrust for the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division, which is remarkable because, as we know, Alec has a badge. He did have a badge as a volunteer solicitor, and he has these quote-unquote graveyard buddies that are fire, police, DNR. These are his close friends, and I'm not buying what he's selling, talking about his distrust for state law enforcement.
And something else that Alec brought up today on the stand was his use of opioids and his use of pills. He brought that up multiple times today. What do you think his strategy was there?
I think that's a ploy for mitigation, something to make it seem like this is what I was doing. I wasn't really in my right mind. But as we know, in any criminal case, I think it's a big misconception. And if it was, then people could just say, oh, I did this, but I was on drugs. So, set me free. That's not the way that works. I think he's doing it to add further to his idea, his narrative that he's a victim. Oh, poor me. And I was on pills. So that explains that. Nah, we're not buying that.
Mm-hmm. And so he's been questioned this morning by his attorney, Jim Griffin. He has yet to be cross-examined by the state. How do you think that will go for Alec?
I think that will go terribly for Alec. I think it will go very well for the state. Abraham Lincoln said, no man has a good enough memory to be a successful liar. And there are so many details that the prosecution is going to be able to bring out that the defense has completely skipped over. But once the floodgates of cross-examination open up, all bets are off. And I think the prosecution is going to really hammer in on Alec Murdaugh. And I think that I don't think that he could wrap his mind around how much is going to come out on cross-examination.
If you were cross-examining Alex, what would you ask him?
I would go through, I'm a very detailed person, so I would go through the transcripts. I'm sure that the state has already done this, but before he even testified, I would have gone through the transcripts of all the interviews, the police interviews with the SLED agent, David Owen, and I would make a column of what to ask Alec and how Alec responds and why this doesn't make sense and how Alec responds. And there's no way that Alec is going to have a plausible explanation for every single thing that happened. Is he going to say every time, I don't know, I didn't trust SLED, I didn't trust the state law enforcement division? That's only going to work for so long. And the idea in itself isn't even plausible.
And I think we have heard him say today he doesn't remember certain things, he can't remember certain things. You know, it did happen 2 years ago, and, you know, in traumatic situations, people can sometimes black out in those moments. How far do you think that will carry Alex for any discrepancies?
I think it's interesting that Alec talks about things in great painstaking detail, things that we don't even really need to know that much about. Like, this is how my parents' house is laid out. And I get that he was getting to a point with that. But then when it goes to certain things like, you know, why were you going 70, 80 miles an hour to and from Alameda? He's like, oh, I drive the way I drive. And that's the only detail, in air quotes, that we get. And it's convenient to me that when he has something that doesn't really have so much to do with his guilt or innocence, he's in very much detail. But then if it's something that could be hurtful to his case, he glosses right over it. And that's not going to fly in cross-examination. If I was a prosecutor, I would pin him down to each and every single thing that he's glossed over so far.
And Alec has been emotional throughout this entire case, throughout his testimony today. What do you make of that?
I think that it's natural for someone to be emotional when they have lost their close family members, his wife and his son Paul. But he's also, if Alec ends up going to prison, he's also theoretically lost a very real relationship with his only surviving son, Buster. But you know, the sobbing and bobbing that goes on, I noticed that it's on sometimes, it's off sometimes, and I think that people can cry because they're sorry that they're in court and being confronted with this. I think that people can cry because they're truly grieving someone. I think it would be super weird and super odd if he just had no emotion at all. Like he didn't do anything. He had no emotion. Then I think that would be very odd. But, you know, people grieve in different ways. People react to situations differently. But it's either he's grieving or he's sad he got caught.